Welcome to the 2009 Stone Lecture. Of the Stone family, we are happy to introduce Brian Doyle, editor of Portland Magazine and winner of the 2008 Award in Literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Mr. Doyle's many books include the Christopher Award-winning Two Voices, which he wrote with his dad, Leaping, and most recently, The Grail, a year ambling and shambling through an Oregon vineyard in pursuit of the best Pinot Noir wine in the whole wild world. His essays have appeared in Best American Essays, Best Spiritual Writing, and he won the American Scholars Best Essay Award in 2000. When we asked Mr. Doyle what he would like you all to know about him, this is what he said, and I'm just going to quote you. I suppose they should know that I think the great human story is grace under duress. Also, laughter is a glorious form of prayer. Also, that listening carefully with your mouth shut is a secret to literature and seduction. Or so says my dad, and he had 8 children, so there you go. Please join Dean Wells and the CGS faculty in welcoming Mr. Brian Doyle.
Thank you. Did I really say that about literature and seduction? Sorry. Can we do some business things first? First of all, you don't know me from a hole in the wall, and I don't know you. And chances are pretty good that our paths are not going to cross much in the years to come. So before I do anything else today, I say thank you. You know, your attentiveness today is a great gift to me, and I have not earned it. So thank you very much. If I try to earn it, I'll try like hell. I swear I will. But thank you in advance. I really think we should say that. Second, thank you to BU for having me. A brave and crazy leap of faith. Third, did anybody ever thank Mr. Stone? Can we all have a round of applause for Mr. Stone? He's actually, when you think about it, he's invested in your laughter today and the possibility of epiphany at Boston University. That seems like totally crazy and cool to me. So, you know, just to mortify him, let's do another round of applause for Mr. Stone. Let's see, apologies and demurrals. My nose has been busted 3 times. So once by my brother Peter with a 2x4. So I have a kind of a nasal mutter. Sorry. Sometimes I use bad language. Sorry. You know, I'm from New York City and I'm a professional editor. So it's kind of expected that I use bad language, you know. Let's see, what else? I get nervous and I do my hand thing. Sorry. Sometimes I sing suddenly for no particular reason. That's really disturbing, as my children say. My son says, Dad, when you sing, it sounds like somebody stomped on a frog in a bathtub. And my other son, Joey, says, Dad, when you sing, it sounds like goose farts on a muggy day. So I'm sorry. And sometimes I make you sing, so I'm not sorry. I am going to try to make you laugh, and then I'm going to try like hell to make you cry. And I would apologize for that, but I won't, because tears are the salt seas of the heart. And laughter and tears are actually quite close, and they're both forms of prayer. So before I sail right off, not talking about what I'm supposed to talk about, let me tell you, I do have one theme. Story, 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 story. Stories are prayers. Stories are powerful. Laughter is a form of story. Sobbing is a form of prayer. They're all related. You know, the whole division of fiction and nonfiction stuff, it's nonsense. Stories, story catching and storytelling are the secret to everything. You already know that in your romantic life. The reason that your first few love affairs didn't work out is because you didn't tell true stories yet. Young man, I'm talking to you. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Mm-hmm. Okay? But stories are also the secret to citizenship and religion and membership in a clan. Catching and telling stories is the single most important part of your life. Trust me, I'm old and I know. And I say so. I'm the dad and I say so. Okay? It's really, really important that you wake up earlier to this than you might have otherwise. I'm not talking about academic stuff. I'm talking about every aspect of your life. Catching and telling stories, trading that coin between us as human beings is the secret to everything. Okay? This is why Alzheimer's is such a cruel disease. It robs people of their stories. To be inside a healthy body, to be trapped in a healthy vessel without any stories. Can you imagine anything more cruel? Okay? So that's my theme today. If you remember nothing else from today, remember that guy with the funny nose was talking about story, 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 the primacy, the crucial importance, the extraordinary holiness of stories. It's really important. Okay? Okay, so let me sail right off. And So that this is not at all a lecture. This is the first Stone lecture in the history of the Stone lectures that is not a lecture in any way, shape, or form. But at first I'm just going to try to make you laugh by telling you a story just for sheer entertainment, because I love to tell it, because it proves that I'm a complete idiot, a complete bonehead. So let me tell you I met the Dalai Lama. I actually had 4 minutes alone with one of the greatest spiritual leaders in the history of human beings, and I totally punted it. So let me tell you about that. He had come to the University of Portland where I work. He was going to give a speech in our big athletic gym, and in the way of university public relations and marketing departments, we were going to apparently take his photograph with everybody who ever lived, right? So I'm waiting in this room. It's the university's athletic Hall of Fame room with these shrines to football players up on the walls. And I'm waiting in there with the photographer. The photographer leaves for some reason, so I'm standing in there by myself wearing my only good shirt, well, the Dalai Lama's a rock star, He's surrounded by an entourage. He's always got tall State Department agents with cell phones, and he's also surrounded by lots and lots of monks. And it's like a Catholic thing. They have really cool uniforms, the Buddhists. The maroon and saffron thing is totally working out for them. So he's surrounded at all times by a bunch of monks, and they all look the same. They shaved heads, kind of burly guys, but they all look roughly the same, and so I'm standing there in this room all by myself, and in bustles this monk, and he comes right up to me and says, "How you doing?" Just like that. And I was like, "Hey, a monk from New York City, cool." I said, "Good, how are you doing?" He goes, "Good. Who are all these people on the walls?" I said, "Well, they're mostly football players. We have an unbelievably great women's soccer team, the greatest women's soccer team in the world. So pretty soon it's going to be all women on the walls, but not today. Today it's mostly football players. Why?" He goes, "Because soccer is the greatest sport of all." I said, "No, it isn't." Giggling, I said, "No, basketball is the greatest sport of all." And he actually looks at me, points his finger at me and goes, "Maybe you didn't hear me. I said, soccer is the greatest sport of all." And I actually said, quote unquote, "Maybe you didn't hear me, pal." I actually said, "Maybe you didn't hear me, pal." And my brothers say, "At least you didn't call him bub, okay?" You didn't say, "Maybe you didn't hear me, bub." I said, "Maybe you didn't hear me, pal. Basketball's a great sport. I mean, soccer's a great sport. It's very sinuous and quicksilver, but nobody scores. It's kind of dull. Basketball, everybody scores. Very generous, very American." And I suddenly realized at that exact second that this was the Dalai Lama. I was talking to the Dalai Lama, and I just called him pal. Well, it turns out in Tibetan tradition, the Dalai Lama enters a room alone. Any large room, he has to enter alone for like a magic 3 minutes to clear out bad spirits. And he's got it in his head after all these years about how exactly long that is. And then as soon as he's done, bang, the whole entourage floods in. So as soon as I had finished lecturing the Dalai Lama about sport, bang, in comes the entourage, and it's like, oh no! At that exact moment that I realized who it was, the moment was over. I was like, oh no, stupid, stupid, stupid. I'm 50 years old, I've done so many stupid things. This goes right to the top of the stupid thing list. It's like, shoot. Anyway, so they come in and grab him and they bustle him off. He's always on the road, this poor guy. He's always giving talks. He never goes home. The poor guy, I mean, he can't go home. Another country ate his country, okay? And many of his friends are dead, murdered by the empire next to him. So the poor guy, so I felt bad. I was like, oh no, I missed my moment, my great moment with one of the great spiritual leaders. So they bustle him out, and he gets all the way to the door of this little room, and he gets all the way to the door, and I'm standing there with my knees shaking, thinking, stupid, 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 stupid. And he gets to the door, and he turns, and he looks back at me, and he goes, "You!" I was like, what? I'm already feeling bad, and the little Catholic boy in me is thinking, he's going to send me to hell. Then I thought, wait a minute, he can't send me to hell. He's a pagan. "You!" I was like, what? He goes, "We'll continue this conversation in this lifetime or the next." And he pops through the door, and that was it. I was like, oh! I'm shaking, So, I mean, that's a weird enough story. But a year later, I got a bad sickness where my hands and feet shut off for a year. Okay, that's a little logistic problem. And my sister, who's a Buddhist nun, my sister's in a Buddhist monastery, good Catholic girl, she sends a letter to the Dalai Lama with my photograph and says, "Your Holiness, you may remember my brother. You met my brother recently, blah, blah, blah. And, can you say prayers for him and take care of this bad sickness for him?" And she gets a letter back from the Dalai Lama. says, yes, I'll say prayers for your brother. Indeed, I do remember your brother. He's wrong. And you can tell him I said so. Cordially, His Holiness, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they have the letter. You think I'm teasing. They have the letter framed hanging in the monastery. So every time I go visit my sister, I have to walk past the moment that I was a total idiot and missed it. So that day I go home from the University of Portland, I go home and I come home. My wife, Mary, is a sweet woman, confusing, sweet, says, hey, how was your day? The traditional husband-wife question. How was your day? I said, usually the traditional answer is good, and then you go have a beer, and I said, well, it was kind of interesting. Really, what happened? I said, well, I met the Dalai Lama. What? What'd you talk about? I was like, sports. She said, what? I didn't hear that. I said, sports. You talked about sports? I said, even worse, we had an argument, and I told him he was wrong. She goes, you are a horse's ass. I was like, Mary, the children heard that. They already know, she said, so. Anyway, so I tell you that story to prove I'm a complete idiot and to make you giggle, because if we giggle, then we'll all just relax and make this not a lecture. And now I'll tell you a rhetoric story, because I'm very sensitive that this is a rhetoric college. It's very sensitive. So I'll tell you one rhetoric story, and then I want to do some readings, and then we'll talk, okay? So here's the coolest rhetorical, grammatical story I've ever heard, which stars my brother Tommy, who was the only one of us who stayed in New York City for a really long time, so he has an impenetrable New York accent. Whenever you call him up, hi, Tommy, how you doing? How you doing? He says, how you doing? Freaking Mets. So, how you doing, freaking Mets? So we're in a pub in New York City. My brothers and I have 6 brothers. And we're in a pub conducting scholarly research into ales in America. And we're on the upper balcony of this pub. And down below us, it's a little tiny pub, little balcony, and we're at our table. 6 brothers, I'm the runt, everybody else is much bigger. And there's a couple down below, a nice young woman, and the guy's a total bonehead. He's just like totally obsequious, and really, he's just being really oily to this young lady. It's just this disgusting. So we're starting to listen thinking, geez, let's take him out and beat him up. The guy's a doofus. And so finally the guy reaches over to the woman. Now we're staring down there because he's being so insincere. It just was annoying. And he finally reaches over to her and puts his hands on her hands and says to her, hopefully this is the beginning of, at which point my brother Tommy lost it completely. Puts his hand on the railing, jumps over the railing, lands on their table. Okay, my brother Tommy's 6'3", 240. Lands on their table, smashes the table to bits. There's smoked salmon salad flying everywhere in the room. It rises up from the debris and chaos and hubbub of the smashed table, of the large man arriving from the heavens, and points his finger at the guy and says, never, and I mean never, begin a sentence with an adverb. Totally true story. We lost it laughing, my brothers and I. We wept with laughter. It was so funny. And the guy down below, of course, he jumps up. He's all arrogant. He's ready to, oh my God, an offense to masculinity. And well, suddenly, bang, all my brothers are standing behind my brother Tommy. And my brother Tommy, to his credit, realizes he's got a whole rank of brothers behind him. He says to the guy, I know what you're thinking. It's a bad idea. So my parents love this story. My mother hates it. My mother don't tell my mother I told this story today. She hates the story. 87 years old, my mother, she goes, I can understand you being ejected from a pub, but to have all of my sons ejected collectively from a pub is really embarrassing. My father loves that story. You should defend good grammar, says my father. So anyway, so I tell you those stories just to get everybody relaxed, and so that you'll remember, never begin a sentence with the word hopefully. Never, 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 because you'll have to face my brother Tommy. So, all right, now let me tell you some stories. Let me just read you some stories, and then we'll have some fun. I want to tell you stories later about, I really want to talk about September 11th because 3 of my friends were roasted to white ash on September 11th. And it is a ferocious enterprise for me to not let September 11th be just an anniversary. If it's only an anniversary or a day we observe or an occasion for vengeance or an occasion for violence, it's not good enough. It's not good enough for me, and it's not good enough for you either. How old were you then? 10? 11 years old? Those twin scars are burned in your brains. And it's not enough that be only an occasion of smoke and fire and fear. And of some kind of weird vengeance. If it only brings more violence, it's not enough. There's something great about that day. There were great things that happened that day, and I want to talk about them later. But first I want to tell you to get back to the original theme of story, look, you swim in an ocean of stories. One of the things that drives me bonkers when I visit grade schools is that without fail, someone will say, I'd really like to be a writer. You know, I always tell kids, look, hey, I'm living proof that there's no writers with a capital W. If I'm called a writer and people like Regina get up and say, oh, Brian Doyle has written all these books and won such and such award, you're gonna be kidding. All I do is wander around catching stories. People tell you amazing stories if you just ask and then be quiet. That's the secret to literature and seduction, as my father says. You know, God, that's embarrassing. Anyway, but look, if you just listen, if you just paid attention, right? 99% of writing is attentiveness. Just listen. So here's one that I heard on the radio. I had to pull over because I was laughing and crying at the same time. Okay, true story. A quiet sergeant tells a story. A plane crashes into a building and people jump out of the windows and he catches in this order a small man, a small woman, a tiny shy woman, a small woman, and finally an imposing woman, as he says. She paused a second before she jumped, he says, and she yells down to me, I'm really fat! And he yells, I yell, you jump now! Which made her jump right quick. And I bend my knees, you know, to try to reduce the blow, but my back has been all a mess ever since. We've been friends since then, 6 years to the day. We laugh a little now at how we met each other. She says, honey, no man but my husband ever put his hands there before or since. And then we laugh and laugh. 189 people murdered that day at the Pentagon where she works, she says, but not her. So she says her job is to remember them and not let their memory be murdered too. Crazy, the price for that be one poor sergeant, his poor back. And God bless me if she and I do not laugh and laugh when she says that, although I have to tell you, it hurts like the devil when I laugh. That's a true story. I heard that on the radio. Charles Baxter was his name, Sergeant Charles Baxter. And I pulled over thinking, that is an unbelievable story. I mean, you hear that, and it's like, how can you ever think that there's a boring story in life after you hear something like that, you know? So here's another one. Here's the greatest story I ever heard. I heard this recently, and I thought, I think that's the greatest story in the history of the universe. This wild world. Here's a story of stories, the mother of all stories. A girl 9 months pregnant decides to marry the father of her child or children. They hurriedly and happily make arrangements with a cheerful and understanding minister, and they parade, attended by those they love, to the altar. Whereupon, having just assented publicly to the marriage, she goes into labor and delivers not one but two children, a girl and a boy, at the tiny shrine dedicated to the Virgin Mary. You couldn't make this up if you tried. The father, age 20, cries. The mother, to her eternal credit, laughs and laughs and laughs. The minister, astonished by nothing after a riveting career, cuts the umbilical cords, hugs the father, baptizes both infants, cups the mother's face in his huge hands and blesses her, and ambles cheerfully back to the kitchen to make coffee. Now, isn't that the best story you've ever heard? A true story. I heard it from the mother. She told me that story. I said, I'm sorry. Could we back up to the beginning where you actually said, she said there was a little infinitesimal pause between the words I do and ow, the beginning of labor. And I thought, oh, that's all of life in the space of like 2 seconds. I do. Ow! You know. Here's another one. I love overheard. I realized recently I'm not really a writer anymore. I'm just sort of a listener. I wander around. People hand me stories like little gifts, you know. And so here's one I was told by a wonderful, sweet friend who had been a logger for most of his life. Here's a story. An old man who was born in a tent in the woods tells it. One time when I was little, my daddy slew a pig for some kind of a dinner for the other men. Maybe logging season was done, or a feller was getting married, or some such thing like that, and they were going to roast it all day long. But while they were making the biggest fire you ever saw, there's a weasel comes and sinks his teeth into the pig and tries to haul him off into the forest. Now this weasel weighs half of nothing, and this was one tremendous pig, so nothing much happened. But then my dad sees what's going on pig-wise, and first he calls me and my sister over to see what he says is heroic ambition. He gives us a whole lecture all about heroic ambition. He's fond of delivering such lectures, and then he tries to get the weasel to let go. But old man Weasel is committed to his work. And finally my dad gets his gloves and gets a hold of the weasel and pulls the weasel for all he's worth, but nothing doing. That is one dedicated weasel. And finally what happened was that the men gave up and just put the pig on the fire. And my dad, he liked to tell about how that weasel hung in there for nearly half an hour before he finally dropped off and gave everybody a disgusted look and went home. That was one hell of a weasel, as my dad says, a phrase I never could forget. Well, you know, if ever you have a doubt that there are unbelievable stories floating around like the most beautiful birds, that is living proof. You know, somebody tells you a story like that, and really your responsibility is to shuffle as quickly as you can to your computer or take little notes. I always carry like 7 pens on my person. As my father says, carry lots of pens in cases of story emergency. You know, he's a tough old man, my dad. Here's one, but see, sometimes people will tell you stories and it says everything there is to say in a little tiny space, you know? This is one of the reasons why the essay is the greatest form of all. You know, are there any novelists here? God help us all. Novelists are garrulous people. They go on and on and on. Total respect, but you know, essayists are better. You know, E.B. White is maybe the greatest of American writers, all due respect to Twain, because a little story has such big shoulders, you know what I mean? The greatest essay, can I give homework assignments, Matt? Where's Matt Parfit? Can I give homework assignment? Everybody here read. What an opportunity. Never read Emerson, and do read Shooting an Elephant by George Orwell. It's probably the best essay ever written. Partly because he says everything there is to say about imperialism and the trap of power and the prison that great power is. You know, great power corrupts, as Lord Acton said, but it's all in a little tiny story. He just tells you one story. So let me tell you a war story. I heard this about a week ago. Here's a war story. A young guy is telling it. He's been home a week. He says the men and women inside the war call it the beast and speak of it quietly. No one gets cocky in a war, that's for sure, he says. That's how you get dead. Like this one time I was out on patrol and I got to staring at cars and trucks for no reason I could tell. It was real cold. You could see your breath, you know? And there was a car parked up the road with a little steam coming out the tailpipe. So my brain gets it that the motor's running, but I don't actually think this. I just sort of see it. I'm not cocky. I'm just paying attention with the back of my brain. So when I get close to the car and a guy jumps out with a weapon, I'm ready, and I drop him quick. It happens that fast, man. It's your reptile brain or whatever working for you. It's hard to explain to people how stuff like that happens. You get to the point where you don't hardly even think anymore inside the beast. I wonder sometimes how I'm going to get back to thinking. Everyone has stories about guys coming back from the beast and wigging out and going all weird in the woods and stuff like that. But most of us, I bet, we come back and we go to the laundromat and we go to the bank and we make dinner. We don't say anything, whatever, to anybody about it. What's to say? All you can say that's true is that you made it back from the beast. You know? This is a guy, he's probably 25 years old, this young man. His name is Paul Stahaley. He's now a major in the Army. And he said to me, he was in charge. He's 24, 25 years old. He's a little older than you. And he's the most handsome young man. He looks like he's about 15 years old. You know, a friend of mine who was in World War II was a torpedo pilot. He said a line I never forgot. All wars are fought by boys, sent by old men, and mourned by women. And I thought, my God, he just summed up all war literature in one line. And it's true. This kid, Paul Stahaley, I said to him, how many people were working for you? He was a captain in Iraq, in Ar-Ramadi. I said, how many people were working for you? About 100, he said. I said, really, you know, what was the worst moment? He goes, the worst moment was I had a coward. I had a coward in my group, and I had to cover for him. I couldn't fire him, you know. I had to cover for him. And so I did it myself because I couldn't bear to put anybody else in danger because he wouldn't take care of his buddies. He wouldn't take care of the men and women who worked with him, you know. And I said, really some of your people died, right? He goes, yeah, but, you know, they died for us. They died, he said, it has nothing to do with America and everything to do with who you're with. You know, that's why wars keep persisting. There's another great line from the great Oregon writer, William Stafford, who says, violence is a failure of the imagination, which I often think, maybe that's the signpost to the future, you know? I mean, there have been a few people who can live by that, like Gandhi and the skinny Jewish guy. Christ, was that his name? You know? But it's really hard to live by that in this world, you know? Somebody said to me once, you know, my 3 friends were roasted to white ash that day. My 3 friends were murdered on September 11th. Murder is the right word, you know? A coward hiding in a cave set out to kill my friends and leave their children orphaned and leave their wives sleeping alone, you know? And so I was talking about it once, and a young woman, in fact, it's always young women who ask the smart questions, said to me, really? So you're talking about how violence is a failure of the imagination? What would you do if you were standing next to bin Laden? I said, well, I'd kick his dialysis machine first and try to break the cord. So, but they said, what would you do? I said, 99.9% of me, I'd want to rip out his heart and stomp on it. I'd want to kill him. And the other little tiny percent of me thinks, yeah, but then what? He killed my friends, I kill his friends. Then what? It's kind of an old cycle, isn't it? And, so anyway. Ugh, now you got me all ranting and raving. But look, there's stories at home, too. There's stories right around you. There's a reason why young people write about, well, mostly what you write about is busted romance, as far as I can tell. But you start out by writing about the things around you, because there's an ocean of story right around you. So I'll tell you one from right around me. And I like to read this. It's hard for me to read, and I always cry. But it's for real. Tears are good, right? A sin. Committed a sin yesterday in the hallway at noon. I roared at my son. I grabbed him by the shirt collar. I frightened him so badly that he cowered and wept. And when he turned to run, I grabbed him by the arm so roughly that he flinched. And it was that flicker of fear and pain across his face, the bright, eager, wholly riveting face I've loved for 10 years, that stopped me then and haunts me this morning. For I am the father of that fear. I sent it snarling into his heart, and I can never get it out now, which torments me and will torment me every day the rest of my life. Yes, he was picking on his brother, and yes, he picked on his brother all morning, and yes, this was a culmination of many edgy incidents already, and no, he hadn't paid the slightest attention to warnings and remonstrations, and yes, he'd been snide and supercilious all day, and yes, he had deliberately done exactly the thing he'd been specifically warned not to do. But still I roared at him and grabbed him and terrified him and made him cower. And now there's a dark, evil wriggle between us that makes me sit here with my hands over my face, ashamed to the bottom of my bones. I don't know how sins can be forgiven. I grasp the concept. I admire the genius of the idea. I suspect it to be the seed of all real peace. I savor those who have the mad courage to live by it, but I don't understand how foul can be made fair. What's done cannot be undone, and my moment of rage in the hallway is an indelible scar on his heart and mine. And while my heart is a ragged old bag after half a century of slings and stings, his is still the new, eager, open, suggestible, innocent heart of the young. He's committed only the small sins of a child, the halting first lies, the failed test paper hidden in the closet, the window broken in petulance, the stolen candy bar, the silent witness as a classmate is bullied, the insults flung like knives at the dinner table. Whereas I'm a man and have had many lies squirming in my mouth, and far too often evaded the mad, ragged Christ, ignored his stink, his rotten teeth, his cloak of soggy newspapers, his voice of broken glass. No God can forgive what we do to each other. Only the injured can summon that extraordinary grace. And where such grace is born, we cannot say for all our fitful genius and miraculous machinery. We use the word God so easily, so casually, as if our label for the incomprehensible meant anything at all. And we forget all too easily that the wriggle of holy is born only through the stammer and stumble of us, who are always children. So we turn again and again to each other and bow and ask forgiveness and mill what mercy we can muster from the muddle of our hearts. The instant I let go of my son's sinewy arm in the hallway, he sprinted away and slammed the door and flew off the porch and ran down the street, and I stood there simmering in shame. And then I walked down the hill into the laurel thicket, as dense and silent as the dawn of the world, and found him there huddled and sobbing. We sat in the moist green dark for a long time, not saying anything, the branches burly and patient. Finally, I asked quietly for his forgiveness, and he asked for mine, and we walked out of the woods hand in hand, changed men. Amen. Ugh. I always sob like a baby reading that, You start out as a parent, you get thrown in the deep end, you have no idea what you're doing. There's no parent school. There should be a parent school and a husband school in Florida. Like Bradenton, Florida, there should be husband school. You have to go for 6 months and get your certificate, and so. But you get thrown in the deep end as a parent. I'll tell you something about your father you don't know. 18, 19 years old, every one of you has a father, I assume. You know what? I'll tell you something about your dad. He's scared to death. He's terrified. He doesn't think he's any good at it. He knows he's screwed up. And he's scared to death you're going to get hurt, and there's nothing he can do about it. He's helpless to protect you against pain. And it's something he'll never tell you, and he has laid awake at night in the deep blue hours of the night, terrified that you were going to get hurt. It's easy to protect you when you're little. It's cars and dogs are the enemy. But now it's not easy because he knows that your heart's going to get stomped on. You know, he knows that you're going to get hurt. He knows that you young ladies are going to have some guy lie. And he can't do anything about it. And he knows, you young men, that you're going to have a woman say, you know what, I don't like you as much as you like me. You know, and then he's afraid you're going to huddle behind a brooding wall of loneliness. He's afraid, you know, that he's no good at it. You know, what was the last time you said to your father, hey, old man, thank you. Thank you for all those freaking insurance bills. Thank you. When was the last time you actually looked in your mother's eyes? What color are your mother's eyes? Do you even know? When was the last time you didn't run out of the house and say, love you, bye, but you actually said, hey, Ma, thank you. You know, thank you. Yes, I was a bonehead mom between ages 13 and 17. I'm really sorry. I called my mother recently, my daughter. I have a daughter and twin sons. I called my mother. My daughter was being unbelievable. For a year, our conversations were, hi, Lily, how are you? And the answer was, what do you mean by that? You know? So I called my mother and said, Ma, this is ridiculous. Like, this is like the evil satanic spawn child. What's happened? You know, and was I like this? And she goes, sweet Jesus, yes. I was like, what? You know, it's not the answer I was expecting. And she goes, oh, you were a bonehead from ages 13 to 18. I was like, what, Ma? Is this the right number? You know, and she goes, oh my God, yes. I remember the day you apologized. It was October of your freshman year in college. I believe it was October 19th. I was like, Ma, hello? And she's like, let me check with your father. I think it was October 19th, 1974. I was like, Ma, this is not the conversation I was looking for here. So anyway, see, I'm totally riffing right off. So let's see. Let me read you one more. Matt, do I have any time left? Have I completely burned my time? Another 7 hours? Excellent. A newt note. One time years ago, I was shuffling with my children through the vast, wet, moist, dripping, enormous, thicketed, webbed, muddy, epic forest on the Oregon coast, which is a forest from 1,000,000 years ago, the forest that hatched the biggest creatures that ever lived on this bruised, blessed earth, all due respect to California and its redwood trees. But our cedars and firs made those redwoods look like toothpicks. And my kids and I were in the biggest creature mood because we found slugs way longer than bananas and footprints of elk that must have been gobbling steroids, and a friend that just told us of finding a bear print the size of a dinner plate, and all of us had seen whales in the sea that very morning. And all of us had seen pelicans too, which look like flying pup tents, don't they? And how do they know how to all hit cruise control at the same time, those pelicans? Does the leader give a hand signal, as my son said? And one of us had seen 2 ginormous young eagles who lived somewhere in this forest. So when we found the biggest stump in the history of the world, as my daughter said, we were not exactly surprised. It was basically totally understandable that suddenly there would be a stump so enormous, it was like somebody had dropped a dance floor into the forest. That's the sort of thing that happens in this forest. And my kids, of course, immediately jumped up on it and started shaking their groove things and dancing themselves silly. And I was snorting with laughter until one kid, the goofiest, why we did not name this child Goofy when we had the chance in those first early minutes, I don't know. This kid suddenly, of course, shimmied over to the edge and fell off, head over tea kettle, vanishing into the mat of ferns nearly as tall as I am. But the reason I tell you this story is that while we were all down in the moist velvet dark at the roots of the ferns trying to be solicitous about Goofy and see if he was actually broken anywhere, but also trying not to laugh and whisper the word doofus, one of us found a newt. Oh my God, Dad, check it out, a newt, Dad! And of course the newt rattled at all the attention, peed all over the kid who held it, and of course that led to screeching and hilarity. And of course on the way home we saw damselflies mating, which also led to screeching and hilarity and me not trying to explain what was going on. But the point of the story is not pee or lust, however excellent stories about pee or lust would be. It's that one day, when my kids and I were shuffling through the vast, wet, moist forest, we saw so many wonders and miracles that not one of us ever forgot any of the wonders and miracles we saw that day. And we saw tiny shreds and shards of more miracles. And what kind of greedy, criminal, thug thieves would we be as a people and a species if we didn't spend every iota of our cash and creativity to protect and preserve a world in which kids wander around gaping in wonder and hoping nothing else rubbery and astonishing will pee on them? You know what I mean? The end. That piece appeared someplace, and it's all one sentence, you know, and I got a funny card from somebody in college, who said, Dear Mr. Doyle, is it legal to write an essay that is composed of only one sentence? So I wrote back, you bet it is, cordially, Matt Parfit. Anyway, see, I could do this all day long. Let's see. Let me prove again that sometimes somebody else's story, all you have to do is just catch it and try to record it. Can you edit it? Yeah, but you got to be really careful. This is why James Frey is going to hell, because he lied. But you can catch it with great respectfulness, catch someone's story and share it with the world. It matters. It matters enormously. So here's one like that. I talked to a male nurse recently. A guy who works in a hospital tells me stories. He's a nurse. A lot of babies who are born who don't live a day, he says. But of course the parents name them, and I keep a list. There was a woman who named her son once. He lived an hour. There was a boy named Chance, and a boy named Jesus, and a girl named Wonderful. We had a stillborn baby here one time, and the parents named Almost. One man named his daughter Lost. Some people name their children after trees and birds and such, ash and pine and hawk and wren. We've had several rivers and one ocean. A lot of names have something to do with music, like harmony and melody, and a lot of them have to do with light and color, like rainbows and sunshine and summer. A lot of the babies don't get any names at all because they die so fast and the mother's exhausted and despairing, and we don't press the matter. Those are the babies who are named A and B and such in our records. Baby boy A, baby girl B. We name them quietly ourselves here, though. If you look at their faces long enough, their names will arrive. Maybe those are the names that they're really supposed to have. You never know. I think every child born has a name, just like every child born has a character and a personality that was never in the world before and never will be again. Me personally, I think that when you're formed in your mom's womb, you have a name that's part of every cell in your body. You are your name. Your name isn't a word or even a sound. It's the you of you. I'm not being articulate here, but you know what I mean. You stare at a baby, a child who's been dead for half an hour, a child who was alive when she came out of her mother that morning, and who she was, maybe who she is, her name appears in your mind after a while. A friend of mine says you can hear the name in your heart, like the ringing of a bell, but that seems too poetic and fanciful to me for what really happens, which is that somehow after a while, you just somehow know her name. I go write it down in our book so it doesn't get lost. We keep the list private, just something among us working here. Something important in ways that are hard to explain. Hey, you're a writer, you write it down. Try to explain it, I can't. I just know somehow it really matters that we listen for what those names are and then write them down. Somehow, I know that's what I'm supposed to do here, keep names. There's a lot of things we're supposed to do in life that are really important in ways that we'll just never understand, but you have to do them anyway. Isn't that right, Mr. Doyle? I thought, oh, my sainted mother. And I wrote down every word that I sat down 2 minutes later and wrote down every word I could remember that he said. And the way he said it, there was a cadence and a swing and an honest, open, naked, emotional substance to the way he told that story that I had to catch. It was my job. I know what I'm supposed to do. And I would suggest to you, it's your job too. It's your job too. You think I'm an old man lecturing you about stuff, and it's not like that. I'm telling you, you have gifts no one ever got in the whole freaking history of the universe. Hello? And it's not like you're supposed to be an insurance executive. Maybe you are. But look, whatever it is, and often I think one of the great reasons for college is you find out what you're not good at. And often it's you're not good at the thing that you expected to be good at. Everybody walks in here expecting to be a doctor, correct? Well, that F in biology is not going to help. So anyway, look, how long has the world been around in this form? 10 billion years, roughly? Somebody here will know, right? But there's never been a you, ever. And there's no been anybody remotely like you. Isn't that incredible? I mean, come on. And in the next 4 billion, what do we got, 4 billion years left before the sun burns out? There'll never be another one of you. That's incredible. Do you totally take that for granted? Yes, you do. And what are you supposed to do, as Mary Oliver says? What will you do with your one wild and precious life? And it's not just falling in love. It's not finding that one for me. That's not all. Yes, that's part of it. It's a really big part. But there's more to it than that. There's more to it than that. One of my best friends, a person who I think is one of the greatest people on earth, is an insurance executive. And the way he sells it to himself, the way he explains his life to himself, his expertise, his talent, is he says, I'm taking care of 1 million children, man. You think that's good work or bad work? I think, what's good work? But he found out that's what he's great at. So that's what college is for. Find out what you were given. What are your tools? And then sharpen them, man, and bring them to bear on the bruised and blessed world. You know, there's only the one you. What are you supposed to do? I'm lucky at this age. Man, I'm 50, you know, and I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm only good at one thing. It's to wander around and listen to people's stories, catch them and share them. That's my job, you know. Everybody here read Leap, right? You know, and long after I'm dead, that piece will keep going and going and going and going and going. And well, it should. And it has nothing to do with Brian Doyle and everything to do with Americanness and courage and grace and guts and mercy and witness. That's what that piece is about. You know, the fact that I wrote it, that it passed through me on the way out to you, I'm just a prism, you know. But that's how powerful stories are. Hopefully you never, ever, ever forget Leap. You know, not because of me, but because it says something about us. It says something about you, you know, that's crucially important. So, look, I've had you for a long time, but let me conclude with telling you, I want to tell you 3 stories because it matters so much to me. Look, my friends, Tommy Karate, Farrell Lynch, Sean Lynch, good men, good Irish Catholic boys from New York. When I was a kid, the greatest ambition we had was to be a cop or a fireman. You know, to be a fireman, what could be possibly better than that? You know, and the next generation that comes after me, like Tommy and Farrell and Sean, they were the first white-collar guys for us in our community, our poor white trash Irish community, right? They were white-collar boys working in the towers, you know, and they got murdered. But I'll tell you 3 stories that you keep in your pocket. 10 or 11 years old that day, every one of you knows where you were that day. I bet every one of you had your mother say, honey, come out here, honey, wake up. You know, you remember it was the most beautiful day in the history of the world. It was so beautiful, not a cloud in the sky in America that day. But look, if it's only vengeance and violence, that's not good enough. So let me give you 3 little stories that you carry like pebbles, like prayer pebbles in your pocket the rest of your life, okay? And when you have a dark day, in my Irish tradition, we call it the black dog. When the black dog is chasing around your feet, you reach in your pocket and you pull out these 3 pebbles, 3 little stories, okay? 1, there was the couple leaped from the South Tower. At the lip of hell, at the very abyss, no one knows who they were. No one knows if they were married. You know the story now, right? But a man reached for a woman, and a woman reached for a man. At the edge of the world, people reach for each other. You know, there's no sense or logic to that. Why? Why would you reach for somebody then? But they did. You know, we're capable of so much more than we know. Please, it's your world, you know, it's your world. First of all, you're going to be taking care of my children, and if you don't take care of my children, well, I will hunt you down. but please, reach for each other. Don't be cool. If I could suggest one thing to you from this end of life, as you're in the you're young and strong and smart and wealthy and healthy and tall. Everybody's tall. Steroid use, bad. But look, you know, don't be cool. Stop being cool. Stop wasting your time. You know, drop the masks. You know, give you a little tip from midlife. The masks, you either take them off yourself or they will be kicked off by life. That's what happens. The pain train has come for us all. It's already come for you. I have no illusions. To be 19 years old, you've already got scars on your heart. But look, stop being cool. It's an act. It's a persona. Everybody's cool. It doesn't matter. Let go. Let go now. You know, that's part of what college is about. Just drop it. Be real. Life's short. Be real now. Save you 10 years. So, but you know the story of the couple who reached for each other. Second story, there was a kindergarten on the corner of Liberty Street. Liberty Street. What could possibly be a better name that day? Liberty Street. And the first plane hits at 8:46. 8:45, school's supposed to start. Of course, there's a couple of kids who are running late. Of course, it's boys. It's always boys running late. It's a teacher waiting out, a woman waiting out on the steps of the school in her high heels, and the last boy is running up. The plane hits. The fires begin. Smoke billows out. The first people begin to leap from the towers, and the boy running up the street stops and stares and says, "Look, teacher, the birds are on fire." And she she looks up and realizes what's happening, scoops up the boy, puts him on her shoulders, and runs off down the street. All the other kids were evacuated out the back, and she runs right through the gathering ash and gloom and saved that kid, because they would have been wiped. And I've often thought, you know, I'll find that woman someday. Before I die, I vow I will find that woman and kiss her on the forehead, not on the lips. My wife would be very upset, but I'll kiss her on the forehead and say, thank you. Thank you for taking care of that boy. You know, and that's another thing. As in the society, we say one thing about children, and we do another. Oh, family values. Oh, it's the centerpiece of our culture. Baloney. There's children who are starving half a mile from here. In my state alone, there's 100,000 kids a day who don't have enough to eat. There's more than 100,000 kids in my state alone who can't go to the doctor. You know? Oh, children are the most important thing in our society? Baloney. So maybe you could take care of that for me when you're going to run the world. You know, we say we're going to put children on our shoulders and carry them. Do we do that really? Think about it. I'm just asking a question. Okay? So the next time somebody says, oh, family values, you say, really? Like what? Like what? Is it okay to send teenagers to die in other countries? Is that okay? Okay, oh, whatever. So, third story. There's a guy on the 88th floor. You know, we forget that they were hit before, 1993, right? The towers were bombed. So two things happened after the first bombings. One, they widened the staircases, so now there's twice as much room to escape down the stairs. Two, everybody went through little evacuation drills, generally once a month. Everybody was set into little teams, generally of 10, and everybody did the drill. Well, they do this again and again and again and again and again for 8 years. Okay, so everybody's running through the little drill. Everybody knows what to do if ever this happens again. There's a guy on the 88th floor. Bam! The plane hits. Disaster, but they know what to do. Everybody goes into their thing, evacuation mode. This guy, his team is supposed to go wait by the elevators. He gets up from his desk. He realizes what's going on. He's not stupid. He goes to the elevator and gets in line. He puts his hands behind his back, he said to a reporter, and he's standing in line. You know, it's not yet hell day. And he suddenly realizes, oh, shoot. He's got a colleague back in his office, a woman, older woman who just had back surgery. And he realizes, oh, shoot. And he said to the reporter, all the rest of my life, I'll be ashamed of myself because I waited a second before I turned around to go get her. All the rest of my life, I'll be ashamed that I hesitated at all before I went to get that woman. But he did. He turned around, left the line, and goes back to the office to get his friend, it's hard for her to walk. It's the second day back at work. You know? So he gets her and he puts his arm around her and they go back to the elevator, but by now the elevators don't work. Now it's hell day, okay? It's the edge of the abyss. So he goes to the stairs. He's thinking, okay, stairs, evacuation. They get in the stairs and they begin to go down the stairs. It would take me 20 minutes just to count the numbers of the floors in real time, how long it took them to get down there. Think about it. He's on the 88th floor. He's got a woman who's really hesitant walking, and they begin to go down the stairs, okay? You're in the slow lane on the stairs. 87. 86. Think about it. All around him, chaos. People are yelling. There's smoke. They know there's fire. People are screaming. It's literally unimaginable. I can't imagine what it was like. They get all the way down to the 20th floor, okay? They've gone down 68 floors in the stairs, people whipping by them as fast as they can go. And he gets to the 20th floor and he said, this young fireman is flying up the stairs. And you remember when you were a kid and you ran up the stairs, your brother was going to beat you up and you flew up the stairs as fast as you could. You grabbed the balustrade and you just zing, you fly up the stairs, you know, taking it 3 at a time. And he said that's what this fireman was doing. Well, firemen that day were wearing packs that weighed anywhere from 60 to 100 pounds, okay? I mean, on average, let's say he's got an 80-pound pack on his back, this fireman. He's already run up 20 flights of stairs with an 80-pound pack on his back, and the guy with the lady says, this guy was flying. You wouldn't believe how fast he was going. And so he's coming up, and so the fireman comes roaring up the stairs and almost crashes into this guy who's got the lady. And he said the fireman was about this far away. Well, as the fireman's coming up around the corner, his pack is skewed. And so the guy with the lady, totally a human totally understandably, stops and reaches to help the fireman with his pack, right? You would do it. All of us would do it. It's a totally human gesture. And he says the fireman is about this far away from him. The fireman yells, "Go! Go, go, go!" And the guy's like, "Okay, well, voice of God, leaving, good idea." So he gets his buddy, and back down the stairs they go. 19, 18, they get all the way out. They make it. They get all the way down. They get all the way down to the plaza. And the guy says, as he walked out from under the shadow of the towers, the sun crossed his face. You know, the beautiful crystal clear day. They walk into the sunshine. And he said to the reporter, two things exactly arrived in my brain at exactly the same time, as only humans can entertain two competing ideas at the same time, right? That's why we have politics. And he said, he suddenly realized and the first was a classic guy thing. He's like, "I saved my buddy." Yes. Yeah, manly. Roar. And he realized on the other side, he said, oh, but of course the fireman died. Of course he died. And so I called up a friend of mine who was a fireman. It was a fireman that day. I said, "You know, all those firemen who ran up, did they know they weren't coming back down?" And he said, "Yeah. Yeah, they did. There's no way we're going to put out a fire on the 102nd floor. It ain't going to happen." But they ran up anyway. They ran up anyway, and we don't have any words for it. You know, whatever the words are totally weak. Duty, responsibility, honor, pension fund. It's all, we don't have words for that kind of guts, you know. Can I give a second homework assignment? Have you all heard Bruce Springsteen's record, The Rising? If you have not heard it, you go get it and play it really freaking loud. It is an incredible piece of art. It's the only masterpiece that came out of September 11th. And there's a line in there where he says, all those firemen, they saw the faces of everyone they loved floating around them in the air, in the smoke. They knew they would never come back down. And they ran up anyway. They ran up anyway. We're capable of doing that. We're capable of doing stuff that's not logical, not reasonable. It doesn't make any sense. Whether you can't protect yourself, you run into it. Run into the fire. You know, you get your heart stomped on. Keep going. Keep going. It's a flawed system, love. You know, it doesn't work out 11 times, and then you get married, and you're really confused. So, look. That's all I want to do is give you those little stories to carry in your pocket the rest of your life. You know, we're capable of so much more than we know. Maybe sometimes human beings are like seeds that only open under great fire, you know? But I suspect that that's not necessarily the case. And to be young and strong and smart, to be given tools where you don't even know what they are yet, but you're beginning to get a little intimation of them, go and use them, man. Go and use them. Because I said so, and I'm the dad. So. Can I ask you one last strange favor? If you want, we can do questions and stuff if you want. I know you guys have to get to class. But can I ask you one strange favor? It's my mama's birthday. And my mama is a tough little Irish Catholic lady from the Bronx. And her favorite song is Amazing Grace. And she's always said, "You'll play that at my funeral." We're like, "Ma, you've totally ruined the song for us forever." You know, every time we hear it, we all cry like babies. And she goes, "Yeah, well, suck it up." She's a tough little lady, the size of a fire hydrant. She's about this tall. But you know, whenever people gather together in a room, some kind of a thing is possible. There's some kind of an energy. Another thing we don't really have very good words for, you know. And whenever everybody points their heads and their hearts in the same direction for a moment, some kind of cool thing is an arrow that flies out. So can I ask you a really strange favor? Can we all sing the first verse of Amazing Grace? I mean, sing it really loud. I mean, you can't sing worse than me. So. Come on, ready? Everybody knows the first verse. Nobody knows the second verse, but we'll sing the first verse. And sing like hell. Sing really loud. Let's embarrass everybody around us. In all these other classrooms, they'll say, "What was that all about?" Ready? Come on, sing with me. Ready? Amazing grace. Come on, sing it. Louder. That sing. Come on, don't be cool. Was lost in now. You're not singing? But now Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.